Are you interested in DevOps principles and how to streamline your DevOps? This video will cover DevOps best practices. Welcome to 100 Days of Trailhead, where the tech community comes to learn Salesforce, learn tech, get inspired, and invest in ourselves. We are your trail guides, here to support you on your learning journey. We release videos weekly. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a video. In the description below, you can find links for everything we mention in this video, as well as books and resources we found useful. Visit our blog, 100daysoftrailhead.com, for other helpful Salesforce and tech content. Many companies want to create a DevOps process or have a DevOps process they want to refine. This video covers DevOps best practices to help you create and define your DevOps process or refine your current DevOps process to meet best practices. Gloria Ramchandani is a Senior Director of Product at Capado with extensive experience in developing and delivering technology-based solutions for over 10 years. She has served a variety of enterprise customers with over 50 Salesforce implementations across the globe. Her focus is to build great products that empower and educate more Salesforce admins, business analysts, and architects on the importance of DevOps.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to 100 Days of Trailhead. My name is Gloria Ramchandani, Senior Director of Product at Capado, and today we'll be walking you through the top 5 DevOps principles. Now, before we start our principles, I'd love to start with just defining what is DevOps. We hear the term DevOps a lot. DevOps actually combines both the words development and operations, and it's a combination of actually practices and tools that are designed to increase your ability to deliver the apps that you're building and services that you're building faster than what we would call traditional software development processes. It brings together topics such as lean software engineering, transformational leadership, and continuous delivery. And the goal of DevOps is really to deliver apps in the software that you build on the Salesforce platform with high quality, with reliability, security, stability, all at a lower cost and effort. Now, let's dive right into our top 5 principles. Principle number 1 is adopt version control. Some of you may be thinking, what exactly is version control? Well, the term version control broadly includes any system that helps people keep track of multiple versions of something, but it's used more often to describe software tools like Git. Each VCS, which stands for version control system, has different pros and cons, but all can be categorized into 2 types, central or distributed. And Git is the most popular example of distributed version control system. Distributed version control systems give your developers the flexibility and freedom by giving every collaborator with a copy of the entire repository at any time. This includes all branches, which are actually your lines of work or what you're working on, and commits, which are actually the saved work at a point in time in history, all on a developer's local machine. Now, modern version control systems are actually designed to help address problems that teams face when collaborating or working on the same piece of code at the same time. Now, imagine if you're working on a page layout or an Apex class at the same time as another developer. Version control can actually help you branch your work off onto your individual branch, which you'll see here in this diagram below, and check in your changes through a commit process. And so once you've made your changes to your Apex class, you can commit your changes, and then you can merge your changes up. Now, version control tells us precisely what changed, why it changed, when it changed, by whom it changed, and what else changed at the same time. And this, most importantly, prevents collisions between developers, so it increases collaboration and productivity. Now let's move on to our second principle. Our second principle is establish standard processes. This is my favorite one because it's actually a loaded principle. When we talk about standard processes, we're actually talking about a number of things. We're talking about your Agile Scrum process. We're talking about how you define value for your users and your customers. We're also talking about your environment and branching strategy. And it's really important to establish a standard across your organization so that everyone is following the same steps. Now let's start with our Agile Scrum process. This is probably one of my favorite images. And what you see here is actually all the way beginning from the ideation of a user story. And the user story is literally in here represented as books on a product backlog, which is the shelf. It starts with sharing your vision, right? And ideating on a user story. You then move through the product backlog, prioritize your work, take it off of the backlog and move it into the sprint backlog, which you'll see here down in the bottom left-hand side. Once it moves from the sprint backlog, it then moves into the sprint cycle, where you have perhaps your daily stand-up meetings, perhaps you're following a specific Agile methodology, such as Scrum XP, SAFe. And so once you've gone through your iterations or your sprint cycles, you then move your work out of there into a testing phase. Your work then gets tested. Is it completed? Do you have bugs? If you don't have bugs, then you can actually move on to the delivery process, which is where you are then delivering it to your customer. And that may perhaps be a production environment. Now, what exactly did we learn from this? We learned from this that it's really important to document and set a standard for your Agile Scrum process. So all of these stages and steps that we see a user story go through in order to deliver value to a customer, and that may be delivering fixes to a production environment, it's all a standard process that our teams are following. So it's very important to establish a standard process on your Agile Scrum process. Now, next is, there's a question that I wanted to ask you all, which is, who is your customer and what value are you delivering? This is a really important question to ask yourselves as you're developing your software and as you're setting your standard processes. It's important to see our work in context by making explicit which customer we're serving and what value we're delivering. And that's when you move from really being seen as a cost center to a value center. And so it's important also to identify the value you're delivering in the first stage of lean thinking, which is one of the foundations for DevOps. Now, let's move on to one of the last processes that's really important to set a standard on, and that's your environment and branching strategy. What we see here on the left is an environment strategy. This is what most of us are used to seeing that develop on the Salesforce platform. You have your development environment, which is a sandbox, and you have your then QA environment, and work gets promoted up those environments until you reach production. And so there's a very linear path with your environment strategy in terms of what environment is used for what. Now, with the introduction of Salesforce DX with Scratch orgs, and also with the introduction of version control, which we talked about in our first principle, it's really important to actually establish what we call a hybrid, which is an environment and a branching strategy. And what exactly is a branching strategy? Well, if we remember from principle number 1, which was adopt version control, you will naturally, with version control, have branches for each feature that you're developing. And it's really important to set a standard process for your branching strategy. Now, here in the bottom right, we'll see a combination of actually an environment and a branching strategy. Your branching strategy for org level metadata management will need to be a bit more complex. And the following development practices contribute to higher software delivery performance, which is merging code into trunk on a daily basis, having branches or forks with very short lifetimes, and having fewer than 3 active branches. So there's some best practices out there on how many branches you should have, what each branch should be used for. As I had mentioned, you could have a branch which represents a feature, which we would call a feature branch, But it's really important to document all this and set a standard for your organization so that it's very clear which environment you're developing in and which branch your work goes to and how it gets promoted all the way up to your production environment. Now, our next principle is automate deployments. Now, with automating your deployments, we want to first talk about the concept of CI/CD and what actually is not CI/CD. And you'll see those are these tools, which we see up here. CI tools are actually for orchestrating and automating repetitive software delivery tasks. They provide an engine for triggering jobs and reporting on their results, a way to configure jobs and pipelines, and one or more runners to execute those jobs. Now, CI actually stands for continuous integration. Now, you'll see here that every change to the code base it triggers a comprehensive set of tests to run. If the build breaks, it's fixed within 10 minutes. So continuous integration, when we're talking about continuous integration, and we've got a really nice graph on the next page, is actually talking about never letting any two developers get too far out of sync. So when we talk about continuous, we mean daily. Now, if we go back here, continuous delivery, every build triggers validations or deployments to downstream environments. Now, ideally, you would want to do continuous delivery all the way to production. Continuous delivery is the concept of getting changes to production quickly, safely, and sustainably. So if we go back and summarize, what actually is continuous integration? It's integrating the work of all developers and teams into a common code base, at least on a daily basis, hence the word continuous. It's running automated tests whenever that code base is changed. It's fixing any broken builds or tests within 10 minutes to keep the process flowing, continuous flow. And some of those benefits are finding errors as early as possible, reducing integration problems, and enabling refactoring. Now, continuous delivery is actually the act of getting those changes to each environment quickly, safely, sustainably, ideally on a daily basis. Now, once you have continuous integration and continuous delivery, that's all a part of that principle of automating your deployments so that you do not have to have a person sitting there manually going in and pushing those changes from UAT to production or from int to UAT. There are a lot of DevOps tools and platforms out there that can help you automate your deployments and help you with your CI/CD process. Now, our next principle, our second to last principle, is improve your test process. Now, testing is a way of verifying quality, but we also need comprehensive tests before sending work to production. And you'll see here, this is the tip of the iceberg. And we'll see this is software quality, right? So at the top level, what you see at the surface level is functional quality. But below the surface, which is probably one of the biggest and most important set of tests, are the structural quality. So your reliability and asking the question of, does it break easily? Do you have security embedded? Performance, how fast is your quality of code? Is the memory efficient? Maintainability, is it easy to build on? And there's a lot of concepts about packaging, right? How you can segregate your work and it's easier to maintain. And then size, which is an indicator of the work done and the complexity. There's some tests out there when we talk about improving your test process for developers. And so static analysis, right? Tools like CodeScan, PMD, unit testing that you can do, which would be what developers do. You have coding standards that you can enforce across your team. So the ways and development techniques of how you should develop. And then you have code reviews. So development techniques like static analysis, unit testing, code standards, and code reviews are all ways of building feedback into the development process to help improve the quality of the work. And so that's really before it even gets to hopefully a UAT environment where you have your business users. You then have comprehensive tests, which can include manual QA testing, UAT testing with your business users, or automated testing. Now, our last principle is track your progress and improvement with metrics. Now, this is probably one of my favorite slides. And you'll see here that most companies don't consider what they're building. And you'll see here you have people scratching their heads looking at a set of dashboards, and they're saying, our new dashboard has all of the different KPIs we can track now. And she asked, what's that KPI trending 0? He said, well, it measures how well we understand them all. So most companies don't consider the two things, which is number one, the why or the purpose of why are you building this dashboard or this metric? And the second is what decision or action or process will it affect? What is the outcome that you want? And so a few questions that I would ask as you're building metrics out for your team to track progress is, why are we doing this? What strategic objectives do we need to achieve? What processes do we need to redesign? What triggers and actions or outcomes do we need to make or do we expect? And what business questions are we answering? So analytics can really drive productivity. It can also help track your progress, but more importantly, analytics can infer planning. And what I mean by that is, as you review your analytics and your metrics, that goes back into the software delivery cycle, into the planning process so that you can plan better. So performance data visibility enables and expedites data-driven decisions about your future investments in the product. It brings light to opportunities for business process reengineering. It improves your delivery velocity. It improves your quality while mitigating risk factors. And monitoring and analyzing how work is done is an essential part of an effective DevOps practice. So DevOps ROI, when we think about your return on investment for DevOps, it's directly rooted in visibility into your entire software value stream. So decisions from the data that you see in your analytics can take the form of business process reengineering for greater efficiency, resource allocation, and product investment levels, which goes right back into the planning cycle. And that's why it's so important to have analytics. Now, as a summary, we talked about the 5 key DevOps principles, which included adopt version control, number 1. Number 2, establish standard processes. Number 3, begin automating your deployments. Number 4, improve your test process. And number 5, track your progress and target improvements with metrics. Now, there's an enormous amount of insight in the broader DevOps community. Yes, there is a community out there. There's a book on Amazon called Mastering Salesforce DevOps by a good friend of mine, Andrew Davis. I highly recommend it. I actually have 2 copies sitting on my bookshelf here. There is Trailhead. Trailhead has several modules out there which are focused solely on DevOps. And there's also the DevOps Institute. So, as a summary, DevOps for Salesforce, I think personally obeys slightly different laws of physics, just given the platform. And we need to figure out collectively how we can stay fast as we get bigger. And this is really the beginning, not the end. And so I hope to do more and more sessions on DevOps and enlightening you all with DevOps recommendations and more principles. But please get out there, get on Trailhead, take those modules, order that book, and join the DevOps Institute and follow them on LinkedIn or Twitter so you can hear more information about the broader DevOps community. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. And thank you, Rachel and Jessica, for having me on 100 Days of Trailhead. Bye, everyone.
And with that, we're at the end. What does your company struggle with in relation to DevOps? Comment below. We would also love to hear what video topics you want us to cover in future videos in the comments. If you've made it to this point, we want to take an opportunity to say thank you. Since you stayed with us, here's a bonus. To learn more about Agile methodology and its history, take a look at the Agile Manifesto at agilemanifesto.org. Thank you for spending time with us. Please like and subscribe to our channel because we share weekly content to support your tech and Salesforce learning journey. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss a new video. We also handpick these videos which we recommend you watch next. Connect with us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and on 100daysoftrailhead.com, all of which are listed below. Thank you for learning with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.